Good evening to you all, and Om Shanti. So, today's topic, life after death. Very interesting topic, right? So, you can imagine the journey of the soul and what is the soul, how the soul travels. Questions around the soul has been very interesting in many different aspects taken up. And so today, with us for this topic, we have John McConnel. And he is a stress management trainer and former prison governor and social worker and author of the book, which I have here, Breaking Through the Darkness. He has been studying and teaching Raj Yoga meditation with the Brahma Kumaris for 30 years and has a strong interest in applying the spiritual practices in daily life. But of course, a wealth of information and experience. And so I hand over to him and enjoy the wisdom.
And warm welcome to everybody who's made the effort to come here. You're very special, and especially on this rather cold, wintry evening. And warm welcome to everybody on the website. So, yes, this topic is fascinating, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to share some ideas on it, because usually it's a bit echoey. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, usually I do things like, positive thinking or overcoming anger and depression and things like that. So this is a bit different. So, but it's a very important topic actually, and really does affect everybody, every human being in the world, because sooner or later, all of us, whatever our beliefs, whatever our culture, whatever our standing in society, we're all going to end up, facing the big D. Big D can stand for death, or it can stand for departure. We will be leaving, whether we like it or not, the physical body which we happen to be in at the moment. And if you're somebody who doesn't believe in things like the soul, and if you're very sort of rational and believe in evolution and all those sorts of things, then the idea of departing this world and leaving your body, can be quite daunting and quite fearful. So how do you feel about leaving your body? Are you okay about leaving your body? There's two yeses and a... Yeah. Well, it's fair enough, because not everybody is going to look forward to it because they don't know what's on the other side. But yes, if you don't have any belief in an afterlife or something more meaningful than the here and now, then you're always going to be stressed. You're always going to be worried about the future. You're always going to be full of fear. And you're going to try and hang on to the life that you've got in this body for as long as possible. And in that state, you want to make the body look as young and as beautiful as it can be. And some people spend a fortune on their body because they believe it's the only one they'll ever have. And they have injections and operations to make it look beautiful and stay beautiful. And even for people in their 70s, 80s and 90s, Vogue magazine and other women's magazines, they're promoting, beauty for the outer woman, because they know that older women have a lot more money than younger women. And so they tend to promote fashions, to make them feel more young and happy and comfortable. and that's okay, but there will come a time when the clothes won't fit. There will come a time when you may, become ill, when you may lose your mind, when you fall down and fracture your hip or whatever and end up in hospital or have a heart attack. And all those other things which are used when the body has reached its limit and it's time to move on. And so, yes, it's a big, big issue. And if you're fortunate enough to belong to a religion of some sort or another, then you're going to have a different perspective, because you will know you're more than a body. You will know there is a being in the body, and that's why we're called human beings. There's the physical bit, the bit of matter made up of different minerals and atoms and molecules and all that sort of thing. There's all that processing which goes on connected with the physical body. And then there's, on the other hand, there's the spirit or the soul or the life force, whatever you want to call that energy. And so knowing that will definitely make a big difference. But even then, you can subdivide the views of that soul and that energy into two different models, if you like. You've got the Western model, which is based on the Abrahamic religions, where religious followers believe, you are a soul, or I am a soul, and you do have a connection with God, or you can have a connection with God, because in a way that's what it's all about, trying to connect with God and pray and ask for things or whatever. And but you only have one shot at it, because the Christianity and the other religions, Abrahamic religions, do not believe in rebirth or reincarnation. Originally, they did, or some of the leaders did, because I looked it up just before I came here, and Plato, he believed in, the soul, and he believed in reincarnation, and he was very influential, from 400 BC until 400 or 500 after, but he still is influential today. But a lot of the original Christian leaders and teachers were influenced by Plato. But then in, I think, 550 AD, there was a meeting of the Christian leaders, and they decided that reincarnation was incompatible with the death and resurrection of Jesus, and so officially it is no longer considered to, be a valid approach. And that is fine. It's not a criticism. It's just the way things are. And then, of course, if you've only got that one chance, then there are all sorts of unanswered questions to do with, life and death. For example, in my own case, I was brought up a Christian, and there were two things which I found very difficult to cope with, and this is one of the reasons why I, left the Christian church. And the first was that that God could send anybody to hell forever. It seemed inconceivable to me that, because I wouldn't want to send anybody to hell forever. I might want to for a while, teach them a lesson perhaps, but not forever. It's a big deal, isn't it, to be sent to hell forever? So I found that very difficult to accept. And then the other thing I found difficult to accept was the idea of being in heaven forever, because the idea of heaven which was presented to me was, one of sort of adoring God forever and maybe playing a harp or something like that. And for a while, but not forever. It would get a bit boring. You know, I needed a bit more excitement in my life. So, the eastern side, you know, is very different. It's multifaceted, it's multidimensional, and it offers so many more perspectives and so many more answers. And through the Brahma Kumaris, you know, I've learned so much more than I knew before. So, is there anyone here who has taken the Raja Yoga meditation course? Can you put your hands up if you have? Oh, well, there we go. So you know all the answers just as well as I do then. So you can come up here instead. Yes, because you get the full picture, don't you, I think? And because even on the eastern side, for example, the Buddhists they definitely believe in reincarnation. So, yeah, but in their case, you know, it's limited. You know, because once you reach self-realization, then you become part of the stream of consciousness, and you lose your identity. Which, personally, you know, I wouldn't want to do that. I'd like to think I was going to be me in some form or another forever. You know, an eternal me, not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. And that's where the Brahma Kumaris have that, you know, strong idea, which the Christians have too, that the soul is eternal, that it is a being in its own right, and it will always be a being in its own right. And the other thing about the Buddhist approach, from what I know, and I'm sure there will be people who, obviously there are people who know better than I do, they believe that you can go up, but also down. And as a soul, you can actually, you know, go into, if your behavior is such, you could go into an animal, so you can transmigrate and end up as a pig or an insect or something like that, because you've got so many different aspects of yourself to sort out. Personally, I find that one a bit difficult to accept for me, but it's fine for others. So I think I like the idea of the soul staying in a human form, in a human body, because there's so much to learn and so much to experience, you know, without having to go into, you know, other ways of being. So, so it's, for me, it's very important to understand that. And also the idea that, you know, we don't just have one life, you know, we have a number of lives. And we actually go through a cycle of births and rebirths. And, you know, for those who are a bit skeptical about that, and I must say, you know, to begin with, once you start, if you have an open mind and start exploring things, then you'll find lots of evidence, you know, to help you to understand, you know, what life is all about. So, for example, you know, if you see yourself as a soul journeying through time over a certain length of time, having different life experiences, maybe, and I really like the idea of starting off as pure consciousness, you know, as a soul coming into a body for the first time. You're full of peace and love and happiness, and you radiate that out. And everything around you reflects that consciousness. So you're in harmony with nature, with other human beings, with the whole of the world. Everything is manifesting in a most beautiful way. Now that, for me, would be heaven on earth. So again, when you have this understanding, heaven becomes a much more tangible, more achievable sort of goal, if you like, because it's something which has existed and will exist again. Would you agree with that? And it's existed on this physical plane. In other words, on this earth, because it's a reflection of our consciousness. So we start off there very pure, very powerful, very peaceful, very positive, and then gradually over time, our consciousness, if you like, loses some of its power and awareness, and we go from identifying as a pure spiritual being to identifying more with the body. And then once we identify with the body, then all sorts of other things happen to us. We start getting attracted to our own body and other bodies, and then desires arise, and so many other things happen which break that consciousness and turn what was heaven into a place of potential sorrow and suffering, because we feel we've lost something really important to us. And that loss in itself makes us feel unhappy or sad. Can you identify with that at all? Because in a way, it's good and it's meant to be, and it's the thing, when we reach rock bottom and we feel I can't take this anymore, because subconsciously we've got a memory that, I have been so much more happy, so much more peaceful than I am now. And then that sort of starts a process of searching and awakening. And then that encourages then to start looking for and rediscovering our original spiritual nature. Does that make sense? And so in a way, we're going on this journey from high to low and then from low to high. And that can only be done through a series of births. It's not all going to, it's a journey, and every soul on this earth goes through this journey, but most aren't aware of it until a certain point in time when they will have this awareness. So it makes things very interesting, it makes things very exciting, because then, I can start thinking about, all these things, in a different way. So for those of you who are watching and haven't taken the Raj Yoga meditation course and may be a bit skeptical about it all, then I can suggest one or two examples of reincarnation and that, which will prove to you that it is possible. And I know at one time there was a well-known BBC documentary where they were exploring this subject of rebirth or reincarnation. And one of the particular stories was they went to India and they spoke to a little boy and who was telling his parents, "You're not my parents. And I'm really the husband of so-and-so from a village down the road." And there he was in this little boy's body saying these things, and people thought maybe he's a bit mad. Why on earth should he be saying things like this? But they took him seriously, and they took him to the village. They took him to the house where he said he had been the husband of this widow, and they introduced the boy to the widow. And then he started saying all sorts of things which only he would have known as her husband. And, everyone's minds were blown by that he was able to say different things which only she would know about. And he could remember the names of all the relatives and the names of his brothers and sisters, etc., etc. So there he was in another body, a little boy's body, but as a soul, he was still remembering his past birth. And actually quite often, apparently, little children can remember things from a past birth. But they learn quickly not to say anything because people will think they're strange or whatever. So it's like normally there'll be a seal put down. So it's there, it's recorded, because everything is recorded in the soul. So that life has been recorded, it's there, but a little seal comes down so you don't get confused, because if you were in the present moment and all your births were in front of you all at the same time, you'd find it very confusing. You wouldn't know who you were, where you were, what you were doing. So it's very interesting the way these things work. But of course, some people, they may think, well, that's interesting, all these films, but I want to know about me. And then, of course, some people go to see past life therapists. And, through hypnosis and that, they can be taken back to a previous birth or a previous time, when they were alive. And quite often those experiences can be very good. And people come back and say, I was a king, or I was this, or I was that. Sometimes, though, and this is the danger of it, sometimes you can end up in a birth which you do not want to remember, where you might have been imprisoned or tortured or attacked or something like that. So it's not something, we would recommend, but sometimes people do it just to find out a little bit more about what happens, after you leave one body. So that's another interesting aspect of it, really, isn't it? So we know we've got all of these, and again, this can help us actually to understand the present, because sometimes we get a feeling of deja vu. Deja vu is that feeling of, oh, I've seen this before, or I know what you're going to say. Have any of you had that feeling of deja vu? Yes. What was it? Can you say what it was?
Right now, but sometimes I feel I've done it before.
Sometimes you feel what, sorry?
I've done that before.
You feel you've done it before.
But I'm currently doing it, but it feels like I've done it in the past.
All right, so you're currently doing it, but it feels like you're doing it in the past. Anyone else? Is there one you can share, either of you? Oh, there's a microphone coming in.
I don't know if it's deja vu, but this was about a year or so ago. I was always wondering, like, what travels faster than the speed of light. And then I thought to myself, must be thought. And then yesterday, I just saw a mini clip on YouTube talking about thoughts. And it was regarding someone saying, thoughts actually do travel faster than the speed of light. So I thought about this a couple of years ago, nobody confirmed it. I was actually asking someone as well. They go, that's nonsense. But I don't know if it is deja vu.
Well, there's some sort of memory there to make you think about it and search for it, I think. Yeah. So were you going to share something? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I was born in East Africa, in Uganda. I remember when first time I came to the UK, I thought, this is home. It's always been my home. And so it was previously, I had not had the thought I would ever leave Uganda. And even when I came, I just wanted to go home so quickly. But it felt like, but this is home. This is where I want to be. This is where I feel comfortable. So, yeah, that was my deja vu.
Yeah, so you have a feeling you've been here before then. Yeah. Yes, in the UK. Anyone else want to share anything? How about you, Ken? Have you? No, you don't want to. You've had a few, but you can't remember at the moment. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I've had that sort of feeling when I went to India for the first time. It felt so natural, and so I felt completely relaxed and happy. And I like the approach to time, which fits in more with mine. I think I must have had a few Indian births because I tend to go with the flow a bit Like I managed to get here just on time. I always do it every time I'm rushing down the road. Now, if I was in India, I'd get there just at the right time, and other people would be gathering just at the right time. That's been my experience anyway. You say you meet somebody at 4 and they all turn up at 4:30. And so I was very comfortable, and I love the Indian culture and the people and everything, So where did that come from? And then sometimes you meet somebody. I was in Mallorca recently, and in the inner space, which has recently opened, and this sister came with her newborn baby and her husband. And I knew her, but I've never met her husband. And, he came and said hello. And we just both went like this, as if, we'd known each other for years somewhere else. It was an amazing feeling, and we just wanted to look at each other and say hello. It was just an eye thing. It was nothing to do with the body at all. Because the eyes are the mirror of the soul, aren't they? And you can, it's a recognition on a very deep, subtle level that there's a connection. And again, so this is all useful information to help us to understand, that there is life after what is called death, in inverted commas, because in actual fact there is no death. There's a moving on from one scene to another. There's a transition, maybe, from a lower state of consciousness to a higher state of consciousness. There's a change in awareness, a change in identity. And this is important because, again, quite often, when a loved one leaves their body, a lot of people in the West will say when somebody dies, we don't usually say die, we say either pass on, move on. Those are much more fluid expressions, aren't they? And more accurate, because it's the soul that's moving on. It's the soul that's passing on. It's passing on to another scene. For Christians, quite often they say, the soul has gone to heaven. They don't say it's vanished. They say it's gone to heaven, and therefore it's still around, but it's not so accessible, maybe. Whereas if you know you're an eternal soul, then, you can pray for the soul, and lots of Christians do, but actually you can do more than pray. You can connect to the soul, and you can have a conversation, if you like, or send good wishes to the soul, because it's just moved on, still on this earth, it's moved on into another body, excuse me, and, you can send good wishes and pure feelings, as we would say, which is another way of saying love. And that actually is good for the soul, because otherwise that soul, if it's feeling all your grief and it's feeling all your all the pain and the missing that you're feeling for the one who has departed, it's going to cause a pull for that soul, and it won't be able to settle happily in the womb in another body, excuse me, because there are these upsetting vibrations having an effect on it. But if you know the soul is still around, it's a source of great comfort. You can still speak or send good wishes. If you have any regrets, because quite often people say, if only I'd said this, or if only I'd said that, like I'm sorry or I love you, things like that. Well, you still can, when you're in this awareness that the soul has just moved on, like going into another room, just a different room, that's all. Still around. Like my daughter lives in Valencia, in Spain, that's 1,000 miles away. We can still connect, and quite often I'll come in in the evening, and the phone will ring, and it will be her. And I sometimes say, how come you're phoning now? I've just come in this minute, She didn't phone before, during the day when I was out, but there was, some sort of subtle connection. And have you had that sort of experience? You just think of somebody, and then, they phone you, or you get a card from them, or something or other. So there's a lot of communication going on a subtle level. So just like, I could do it, say, with my daughter in Spain, I could equally do it, with my parents who are now in other bodies. And I often wonder, where they are and what they're doing, because they'll be in their 40s probably, something like that, 40s, 30s or 40s. And I'm hoping that they're having a good, interesting life. But again, you see, this is another aspect of life after death, because you take your sanskars with you, or your personality traits with you, into your next birth. So again, this is where reincarnation really helps to understand what's going on in my life now. And also, it's going to help me to understand what my future life is going to be like. So, that's vital information, because we all want to die happily, and then, or a lot of us do anyway, die in inverted commas, and we're all hoping for a good life afterwards. Now, you're not going to have a good life if you haven't done good things. That's not the way it works. So those who go to hell are actually those who have been quite negative in their behavior, who've become disconnected from their goodness, and if you like, they've been swamped by all the different forms of illusion, by all the spiritual diseases, excuse me, which we all have. We all have some lustiness, some greed, some anger, some attachment, and all of us have got, ego, because that's the last thing to go. But if you're working on all those things and doing your best to overcome them in the here and now, then that's going to stand you in good stead in your next birth. If you're forever going around, grasping everything you can, fighting everybody, killing people, regardless, what's going to happen in your next birth? You're going to be suffering a lot. You'll probably be on the receiving end of a lot of fighting and killing and greed, because you've inflicted that on others in your present birth. And every soul has to learn the lessons, and every soul has to pay off their karma, because it's the law which drives the whole of existence, the law of karma, the law of give and take, the law of, reaping what you sow. The whole thing, the whole cycle actually is all about karma, doing good, creating good, and then eventually going the other way. Does that make sense?
What about those young boys who were in the First World War that didn't get to kill people?
Yes.
You could hit them.
Yeah, but it's the people online who may not. So just repeat the question then.
I said, what about those young boys that had to go and fight in even the First World War, but all the wars in the world? They didn't get a choice, they just had to go. And kill people. Yeah. They had to kill the enemy.
Yes. Yeah, but again, you have to see a bigger picture with all of these things, because the law of karma is operating on different levels. It operates on an individual level, and it operates on a collective level, it operates between countries. So we're seeing now karma being played out in the Middle East, in the war with Ukraine and Russia, and everything is all connected. Now with those, if we think of them as souls rather than young boys, that's going to give a different perspective on it. You know, if we just think of them as young boys, it was awful. So many millions were killed, you know, needlessly in some ways.
But they themselves were required to kill.
Yes, they were. They did have a choice. I know it wasn't a good choice. It was either go to prison as a conscientious objector, or it was to be shot on the battlefield by your own side if you didn't go forward. And a lot had to take drugs and alcohol and things like that to overcome their distaste at doing something which their soul didn't really want to do. But again, if you were to take a bigger, long-term picture, then maybe those souls were in battles in the past where, you know, they were forcing people to fight. We don't know. This is why we don't make any judgments about anything, because it's a much more deeper, more complex thing than we realize. The most important thing is not to blame and not to judge or punish anybody in our own minds, because we don't know a fraction of the whole story, because it's gone on over a long period of time. Does that make sense? If you take that spiritual perspective, this is where the spiritual perspective is so important. If we take a political or a social justice perspective, or, you know, a more that sort of approach, or a humanistic approach, then it's all outrageous and awful, and obviously, you know, we wouldn't want to support it in any way. But and I've been on many marches, you know, protesting against wars and things like that. But I noticed, you know, I was just as angry as the people who were promoting the war. I was angry for peace, which didn't, looking back now, it wasn't the best thing to do, because I was generating even more negative energy, which fueled the whole thing rather than calming it down. So
I'm just thinking of my grandmother's two brothers who were Irish but died on the battlefield in France fighting for the British Army, because they had to. They didn't have a choice. So if their souls came back, I think there would be some sense of injustice, anger, and maybe revenge.
well, there could be, definitely, yes. This is where it all plays out, doesn't it? Because then if they go down that route, rather than turning the other cheek, which is the Christian message, non-violence, then they're going to end up in that situation again, maybe being shot or killed in you know, an IRA attack or whatever, who knows? So it's all fascinating, but in order to be able to cope, we have to go to the essence of it, I think. You know, remember, we're all spiritual beings on this earth, and we use the word drama or a play. You know, we're souls and we have roles. We're not our roles, we're separate from our roles, but we are playing a part in this drama over time. And we'll have had maybe a hero actor at one time, a villain another time, etc., depending on our karma and what's gone on.
So really, we should look at serial killers in a more humane way, really. We don't know what they've been through.
No, we don't. And in fact, I mean, as a prison governor, I was working in a top security prison, and I had to, one of the jobs was to interview prisoners after 2 or 3 years, and some of them have done the most appalling things. And when you actually, if you gave them the space without judgment to tell their whole story of all the horrific things which happened to them as babies and children and all the rest of it, it's not to excuse, you can never excuse these things, but you can understand how they could have happened, how they could have been driven almost to do what they did. And I always had a feeling of if I'd been in their shoes, I may have done exactly the same. You know, and influences which souls are under can be very, very powerful, very, very strong. That's not, tend to think you're condoning. It's not about condoning what people have done at all. It's about understanding, because with understanding then comes compassion, and then there can be, in inverted commas, salvation. There can be a way in which that person can transform and learn and change and never do that again. Yes, I mean, thank you for those questions. They're interesting questions. So, is this making sense? Does it give you a better idea of what, you know, life after death can be like? There are other aspects to it. So, you know, there are people who have near-death experiences, and this is another proof, if you like, that there's more to life than meets the eye. And quite often when someone has a near-death experience, you know, they're in a traumatic situation, they may have been in an accident, they temporarily leave their body, or they may be on the operating table, and you know, they it's a case of, you know, life and death, and sometimes they do leave their body, and then they always describe that they go into the light, and they have amazing experiences. So a famous example is Anita Morjani, you know, who wrote Dying to Be Me, and she'd had cancer and that, and she struggled with cancer for many years and had lots of operations, and it came to the stage where she was on her way out and had a final operation, I think, and then she went into the light, and I'll just read a little bit about it, it's quite interesting. And so she describes it as the physical life is like being in a warehouse with just a little torch, and you shine it and you just see the thing which you shine the light on. You don't see the whole picture. But then imagine that one day someone flicks on a switch, and there for the first time in a sudden burst of brilliance and sound and colour, you can see the entire warehouse, and it's nothing like you've ever imagined. The vastness, the complexity, the depth and breadth of everything going on around you is almost overwhelming. You can't see all the way to the end of the space, and you know there's more to it than what you can take in from this torrent that's tantalizing your senses and emotions. But you do get a strong feeling that you're actually part of something alive, infinite, and altogether fantastic. You are part of a large and unfolding tapestry that goes beyond sight and sound. You understand that what you used to think was your reality was in fact hardly a speck within the vast wonder that surrounds you. You can see how all the various parts are interrelated, how they all play off each other, how everything fits. You notice just how many different things there are in the warehouse that you'd never seen, never even dreamed of existing in such splendor and glory of color, sound, and texture. But here they are, along with everything you already knew, and even the objects you were aware of have an entirely new context, so that they too seem completely new and strangely super real. Even when the switch goes back off, nothing can take away your understanding and clarity, the wonder and the beauty, or the fabulous aliveness of the experience. Nothing can ever cancel your knowledge of all that exists in the warehouse. You are now far more aware of what's there, how to access it, and what's possible than you ever were with your little flashlight. You're left with a sense of awe of everything you experience in those blindingly lucid moments. Life has taken on a different meaning, and your new experiences moving forward are created from this awareness. So it's a nice description, isn't it? And in meditation, we're wanting really to get into that, because, you know, the soul is light. The soul is conscious energy. The soul is belongs and comes from a world of light. The light, and in the light there is the divine again, or the supreme. Again, this is a important distinction which makes a big difference to life after death. The recognition that there is one source, one God, one supreme being, whatever you want to call that life force, that energy, and with that we can connect, with that we can recharge, with that we can become with that connection we can become who we were originally, beings of peace and love and light. Without that knowledge or that awareness or that experience, it's going to be much harder to actually become that again, and we'll end up having to go through a painful process of paying off our karma in other ways. So Raj Yoga really enables us to reconnect with the divine and pay off our karma through divine power, divine energy, divine compassion. And then that enables us to live this life at this moment in time in a more fulfilling, more positive way. And then that's going to make sure that our next birth will be better than this. If that makes sense. Sorry, what's the time, by the way? Yes. Does that make sense? So really, it's all good, and it's all exciting, and it's very interesting. And sooner or later, everyone will wake up to this different awareness, this different consciousness, and they will be able to look forward to better life. Yes. Sorry? Well, sooner rather than later, because the physical world actually is a manifestation of our consciousness. And at the moment, the collective consciousness is completely degraded, and so is the world, and it's falling apart around us rapidly on every level. But the good news is that the new awareness, the new energy, the new life is growing just as the old is declining. So it's a bit like winter and spring. Winter, it's pretty gloomy and wet and not so nice, and then all the leaves are, decaying on the ground, and there appears to be nothing good around at all. But underneath the surface, the plants have been recharging, regathering their energy, and then they're starting to grow and emerge again. And so we're in this transition period where all the old has to finish and the new will emerge, and we'll start a new cycle of time and a new cycle of energy, a new cycle of history. And that cycle always repeats identically. So you could say every moment in it is eternal. Every moment. So, you've heard me speaking and you've been sharing this moment in time countless times before, but we don't remember it. But we could access it if we wanted to. Yeah, well, you don't change anything. I'm saying exactly what I said so many thousands of years ago. Oh, you need a microphone, yeah.
I understand what you said about how it's happened countless number of times. But when you've got the awareness, are you able to change it as well? Because you've got the awareness. So anything going forward, you can change your life for a better way of living for yourself.
You can, yes.
And that will affect the rest of the cycle as well?
Yeah, it's all connected. Yes. So if you change your life now, this is the time actually when you create your whole future for the whole of the next cycle. If you've now become very powerful, very positive, full of pure energy, that's going to create your whole destiny in the future. It's a special transitional moment in time when our eyes open and we're given the insight, but also the power to change. But then this is where the struggle is, because there's the old and the new. And we're conditioned into the old and creating the new thought patterns, new habits, giving up meat, for example, living a life of non-violence. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a path. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you're looking forward to the future?
I mean, no, like, ever since I've been introduced to knowledge, I do kind of question myself, like, okay, so now you know that repeats. So if you make a change now, it'll affect the rest of the cycle and probably the whole cycle. So I thought, why don't I just do it now? Yeah.
Yes, if not now, then when?
Yeah.
If not you, then who? That's a quote from Daddy Yankee. But yeah, so she would be a very good example of somebody who's done it. You know, and she's inspired us all, and you know, we're following in her path, you know, to some extent. But I mean, the nice thing about it is you have a choice. You know, it's a bit like the Matrix. You know, you've got those two tablets, and you can take one which deadens your consciousness and leaves you just doing what you've always done. And unbeknown to you, you're being used by these creatures to suck out all your energy. Or you take the other, which is like the truth pill, and as Anita says in this book, once you know, and there's no going back. And you can go back, because some people do. They think this is too hard, I don't want to do this. But it will still be in your awareness, and it will still emerge sooner or later. Maybe not now, but maybe a year's time or 2 years' time, you think, time's come, I want to do it now. I've had enough of this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here now, you see.
Yeah.
So you're an old soul.
Okay, I have a bit of a question. You mentioned something about identity. Are you aware of your identity once you leave this body?
That's a good question. You initially, yes, because you'll be out of a body temporarily. So there'll be some awareness that I'm more than a body because you're not in a body. But then, super quick, quite often, not in every case, because some people, if you leave the body suddenly, you may wander around for a while before you actually enter another body. Because usually the body needs to be, and the karma needs to be such that it's ready to receive you in your new body. But in the womb of the the soul in the womb that it enters, it will have a full memory and awareness of what it's done in its last birth. And there's a lot of suffering that goes on there if you've led, you know, a not such a good life. Because you'll have had a taste of who you really are as you've left one body and gone into another, and then you'll be thinking, oh my God, you know, rather than being this lovely being of light, I've been full of anger, etc., etc. And there's a lot of realization which goes on in the womb before you come out. So sometimes, you know, the pregnancy from the mother's point of view will be quite challenging, because there'll be a little baby in there kicking and fighting and struggling, because it's fighting and struggling with its conscience on one level, because that awareness it exists even though the body it's in isn't fully functioning. That's my understanding. It may be wrong on that. Someone can correct me if I am. But we talk about the jail of the womb because there's that awareness of what we could have done and what we have done and the mismatch between the two. Any other questions? You've asked some good questions, thank you. It makes it much more interesting when you get questions. Do we short meditation then announcements, is it? Yeah. You're announcing it. Sorry? Oh, I'm mentioning the products of the week, and then you're mentioning next the follow-up. Okay. Well, what should I do for first? I'll mention the products of the week now. And the products of the week is da-da! I know how to live, I know how to die. And it's the thoughts of Daddy Janki. And it gives you lots of food for thought about the whole living and dying process. Because if you know how to live, you'll have a happy death and you'll have a happy future. And she was a good example of that. Even though she had to struggle a lot in the body, she had lots of physical challenges right throughout her life because she was paying off karma. But at the same time, she had that awareness, and so she used those situations to actually empower herself even more. So, you can be in a difficult situation, you can allow it to drag you down and say, it's my karma and what can I do? Or you can use that same situation to empower yourself and overcome the challenge of whatever it may be and rise above it. Anyway, I better stop now then. So, yes, just sit back there and relax. And do some slow, deep, gentle breathing. And bring your attention into the present moment. And remember who you really are. So I'm more than a body. I'm a being in this body, a spiritual being, an eternal being, a being of light, a being of conscious energy. And I've had a number of previous births on this earth. Previous lives. Because I'm on a journey of expressing and experiencing what it's like to be on this physical plane. I've had many experiences, some very good and some not so good. And now I'm nearing the end of the journey. It's time for me to reflect, to remember, to reconnect with my truth, and reconnect with the divine, with the supreme being. So I connect and I receive the power, the energy, the understanding to return to my original true self. And when I face any challenge in this physical plane, to help me to remember and overcome the challenge, I say to myself, Om Shanti. I am a peaceful being. And now, holding on to these powerful positive feelings, just bring your attention back into the room. And thank you.
So, thank you very much, John. That was very enlightening. And you did mention that the Raj Yoga meditation course, if you hadn't done it, and those watching online, there's going to be an in-house meditation Raj Yoga course coming up soon, and that's going to be on the 22nd of April. That's a Saturday, and it's at 12:30 p.m. to 1:45, and it will happen in 4 Saturdays, so for the whole month, so every Saturday. And so if you'd like to join, then you're most welcome to. You may go on the website and register, and you'll get an email, or just give us a call, and the contact details are on the website. So, and personally for me, what I took from tonight was these beautiful words. Just when a soul is moving on and passing on, it's very gentle to use the right words for understanding how soul moves. But that when we go with our sanskars, and that the whole learning of working on yourself is an ongoing process. And so I need to learn my lessons, I need to learn to change the aspects that I wish to change, and keep growing and have a positive approach, not to blame, not to judge, and stay connected to the light. Thank you very much, John.
Thank
Om
you.
Shanti, and thank you for coming online and in-house. See you next week. And yes, next week's topic is understanding defense mechanism, and it's going to be by Nina Buchanan. And so, welcome to the talk. And please call your friends and family if you wish them to enjoy this atmosphere here and to join online. Thank you.